Hi, it's Jonathan Mamaril here, the host of the HR Engage podcast. And here today, we've got another great episode with Leanne Lazarus. Leanne, how you going?
I am very well, thank you, Jonathan. How about you today?
I'm actually great because I'm actually in the hot seat this time. Usually you're the one that's asked me the questions through the HR Lens webinar series and all the other series I'm involved in with people to people. But this time we're turning the tables onto you. How do you feel?
The lack of control is disturbing, but it is okay and I can work through it. I'm resilient like that, Jonathan. That's why
And that is exactly what I was looking for in inviting you onto the show today. No, it's in all seriousness, absolute pleasure to have you on this podcast because really for the last number of years in particular, you have been the go-to HR recruiter, especially in Queensland, but of course nationally, but especially in Queensland. So I really wanted to get you on board and ask you some questions from your perspective around the HR scene.
Awesome.
Okay, so another HR Gauge podcast episode, and I just wanted to. Sometimes what I do is I'll do an intro and talk about your history and all those great things that you've done because you've got an amazing recruitment history, in particular in the HR space. But you're here with us today, so tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, Jonathan, I have been in recruitment for a very long time, starting my career in South Africa and then moved over to Australia where I was approached for a role, came on board and then moved up from Melbourne to Queensland. Love Melbourne, weather's not my favorite. Moved to Queensland and sort of embedded ourselves into the market here. I have been with People to People since 2018, joined the team while they were going through a bit of a growth phase where our strength in the Brisbane office has always been more so in the finance and accounting space, but joined the team to help broaden out their specialist services, which didn't necessarily include HR when I came on board. It definitely does now.
Yes. And can you just tell us a little bit about how, you've obviously a lot of people go through this where they go a bit more general and then they start to specialize. Can you tell us a little bit about that specific journey and how you then start to identify that HR recruitment being really a specialist thing to do? And for you, why you essentially picked that?
I've always really worked alongside and with HR and always really enjoyed that process. And I've always found what HR do and the value that they bring and the challenges that they face really interesting. And the other side of it is I'm not a transactional recruiter where it's job in, place it, move on. I'm very much a big firm believer in partnership. So the other side of it is also remembering that in our industry, your candidates today are your clients tomorrow, and your clients today are your candidates tomorrow. And that's why I love that HR vertical. So after joining People to People, I identified that there was really an opportunity to focus in that space, but you become more of a industry knowledge well, if you want to put it that way. So every conversation you have, I'm learning, I'm taking on board information, but I'm able to share that in the broader market, which means that HR professionals at times will sometimes sit there and go, is it only us that's experiencing this? But in those conversations that I have, I can sort of give them a bit of what trends are happening in the market, making them feel potentially a little bit more at ease that it's a national thing or a market thing, not just a them thing. But I've always enjoyed the HR vertical. I get a lot out of it in terms of knowledge and information, but getting an understanding of what the market's doing. It's not a vertical where you're necessarily going to be generating a lot of roles just in the HR space, but it's a role that really focuses on being able to broaden out the relationships in a business. And HR is a critical role in an organization. So that's why I love having those conversations and interactions.
It sounds, and look, I'm not a recruiter, but it sounds to me like it is a difficult area to recruit in. And I'm saying this partially because of what I see, but partially, of course, of, our discussions, on many periods. It seems to be a much harder area to recruit in that vertical. Why do you think that is?
I think it's not always necessarily harder, but I think it's a vital match between two parties. About making sure, especially from an HR professional's perspective, that their boxes are ticked. Looking at going into an organization where values align,
Yeah.
where the role opportunity or the challenge or the scope aligns. Being in looking at an organization that values what HR brings to the table is always critical. From a company's perspective, they're wanting to make sure that the person that they bring on board is going to help build that culture piece, that retention piece, the engagement capabilities. So it's a critical process to make sure that both parties align. It's not a vertical where potentially you can just go, they've got the skills, they can do the job, place them. It's having those more in-depth conversations and understanding around what both parties want and making sure that fits. I think in our industry, sometimes people, working on a desk can take offense if someone goes, that's not really for me. It's not about what I think. It's about what's right for both parties. And years ago, it used to be very much a client market where it was a case of this is what I want and what I need, not negotiable. It's shifted to be more about what the candidates or the talent was looking for. Whereas now it's a 50-50 blend, and people are quite comfortable and happy, especially in the HR space, to walk away from an opportunity if they identify that it doesn't align, or if there's potentially going to be a risk to or a liability for them and their brand. It's a critical partnership between the two. So it's about having that open and honest conversation and being on the same page and putting opportunities in front of people for them to go, this ticks boxes, that doesn't. And I think that's where sometimes the challenge comes in, where it's not a transactional process. It's probably the best way to put it.
And I suppose taking that one step further, you say that it's not necessarily a really purely transactional process where maybe other recruitment verticals are a bit more like that, and partially to do with client pool, but also, the HR pool, but also with the client pool, that there's that too. And you've seen that change over a little bit more to 50-50, as you said.
Yeah.
Do you see that? Do you know the reasons why or the rationale behind that? Is that more because of both parties needing to make sure that it's actually a better combination, as opposed to let's just get the most experienced person or the most skilled up person to take on that HR manager role or whatever that role might be?
Look, skills and experience tick a lot of boxes, and
Yes.
it's still an imperative part, especially when you're talking HR, when you look at legislation and all the other challenges that come with it. I think a lot of it comes down to, from that value alignment is critical, because no one wants to work in an organization if there's unethical behavior or if things aren't being done right. From an HR perspective, you're liable. So that's one challenge. I think the other side of it is we often see that people are moving or looking to move on from roles where they've gone into position with the information given to them that this is what the role is.
Yep.
But when they've gone into the position and they've been in it for a little while, there's a bit of a mismatch between what they were told and what the role currently looks like. And that's one of the questions I always ask my clients when they go, oh, this is what we want. And that's great. But what do you need? What does that role look like right now? It could be that that role could be, the ideal role in 12 to 18 months' time. But if you're talking to an HR professional and tell them that that's what they're looking for now, they're going to go in, it doesn't align. So that's where we see a bit of turnover from that perspective, and where people are a little bit more hesitant, and it's critical that they want to make that right move. No one in HR wants to go into a role and be there for 3 months and identify it's not the right fit. So I think it's a critical process. It's a critical conversation, and open, honest, and transparency is critical.
I mean, just listening to that sounds like a lot of hard work on your part. How do you match that with all the other pressures that you might have, right, as a recruiter? And I think we all know, I don't necessarily say what those are, but with all the other pressures you have as a recruiter, how do you, because that's really, how do you move that away from just the pure transactional? Because it's about value alignment. It needs to be so many, it sounds like it needs to be so many discussions with, say, the HR manager or the HR business partner, and then so many discussions with the client. And then basically, who is the client? We're talking to the CEO or whoever's going to be the direct report. Like, there must be so many conversations just to get even close to what might be the value alignment. Like, how does that work?
Oh, look, it's not a one conversation to be had. It is multiple. From a client's perspective, as I say, I'm not a transactional. I don't like to be a transactional recruiter. So I like to spend time with my clients, get to know them. I like to, and the conversations I have, I'm not an overly fluffy person. Is maybe one way to put it. Well, I'll ask the hard questions because I want to know what the challenges are, what the role looks like, what the opportunity gives. I ask all the questions because I want to be able to present that to my talent and say, look, this is the hardcore reality of what you're walking into. They've just gone through a massive restructure, time low. that's going to be a big piece of what you're walking into. So just be aware of it up front. So they know exactly what they're walking into based on what I've been able to obtain. And obviously there is going to be other things that are happening in the background that
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily going to be aware of because it hasn't been shared with me. But by having those open and honest conversations, an HR professional can walk into that interview having an understanding and then make an informed decision for themselves. And I say to people, just because you're going in to have that meeting with my client doesn't mean that you have to take the role or go to the next stage if it's not ticking boxes for you. But it also means that you might go in and you might not be the right fit for that. So it's just about those constant conversations. And the nice thing in the HR space, as I said earlier, my clients today are my candidates tomorrow and vice versa. So I'm having multiple conversations along different parts of their journey. So there's a good understanding or a better understanding of what's important to them.
Yeah, and I suppose just taking up that point there, where you say, look, they're a client today, but they could be candidate tomorrow, and vice versa. That's really interesting point with this HR vertical. Maybe in other areas they don't. Okay, maybe executive recruitment or something like that might be sort of similar-ish, but this is probably a little bit different because there, of course, like HR, a lot of HR teams are involved in recruitment of other positions. How do you then bridge that gap? Because that sounds like a very different, very different conversation from a value alignment to, oh, actually, we do have sort of different positions available. How do you turn that conversation around? It seems like a lot of almost like wearing a lot of hats, Leanne. Is that probably the best way to describe that?
Oh, look, I think you do. And that's where that whole partnership piece comes in. From my perspective, I've got clients or candidates that will phone me and ask me just about what's happening in the market. When I'm phoning my clients, I'm not phoning them just to go, hey, do you have a vacancy for me to work on? It's about that partnership, that value add, which is why, I started the series like through the HR lens with doing regular forums. It's that value piece. And that's where it sort of opens doors to conversations. I can sit with an HR professional, different levels, and they can talk to me about their business. They can go through that. And when they then go, that's great, but can I talk to you from a personal perspective? I'm not desperately unhappy, but I'm looking to explore the market. That shows the trust. And that's something that is built. It's not as I say, going out on one visit walk and coming back and going, I've got them for life. It's about building that trust and that partnership, which is done in different ways, different forms, and different conversations. And that's why I love the HR vertical.
Yeah, it sounds like we've had so many conversations in the past about the HR space, obviously from different perspectives.
Yeah.
But I think if anyone sees your LinkedIn posts or any type of content you put out, again, like through the HR lens series, you seem to, almost take information that is relevant, hot topics, whatever you want to call them, but give the HR perspective without really any, how do I say, not necessarily any bias. How do you come to that sort of thinking? Because I think it's really interesting. You're in a very, traditionally you'd say a very transactional space, and yet you almost pull away from that transactional space, which would seem to me be very counterintuitive.
No, I think, from an HR perspective, I think looking at each conversation that I have with an HR professional, and I'm not talking about just an HR executive or an HR leader.
Yep.
It can be an HR administrator and HR coordinator. They're still able to share with you what's happening in their business, in the market, the challenges they're facing. And those conversations are not just from a client perspective as in a sales conversation, but it's also from that interview perspective, gaining that knowledge, gaining that information, and asking a lot of questions. And those questions are focusing on what's important for the client or the candidate, but also for me to understand what's happening in that market. So I can share that information. So it's like if you have a stone on top of a hill and as it rolls down, it picks up more moss as it goes.
Yeah.
There's that kind of concept from one conversation to the next. And you can go into the next conversation and say, this is what I'm hearing in the market. What are you experiencing? So that gives you a really good idea of what the challenges are being faced in the HR vertical, what they want to hear, what they want to know. And that's the information that I utilize. But by having those conversations regularly, but also checking to see what is happening in the market when it's coming to things like legislation changes, cases coming out. Those are also things that are valuable insights and information that clients and candidates love to know. because it impacts their market, it impacts their vertical. So I think that's also critical. But just having those conversations and just being on the same page, I think is always very important. And again, it's that, and I say it a lot. And when I joined the team here, one of my colleagues, Mel, said to me, "You use the word partnership a lot." And I was like, I do. And then give it 3 months and she was doing the same. So it's about that trusted partnership with both my candidates and my clients.
Yeah. You talk about trust and transparency seem to be very two key concepts that essentially are bedrock of your, I suppose, philosophy, if you want to call it, in terms of what you do. How did you come to that specific conclusion about those two particular concepts of building trust and having that transparency? Was there a particular event that happened? Was there a particular thing that happened, or that happened over a period of time?
I think it's just something that when you start out in this industry, it's all about numbers. It's all about getting orders and getting placements, which is great. But I've always thrived on that repeat business, candidates and clients. So when I moved up from Melbourne to Brisbane, I would still get calls from people that I'd placed 5 years ago that would go, "Hey, are you still in Melbourne? Can you still help me?" Clients were doing the same thing. That's where that mindset came from, where I didn't want to just walk in, place a role, get the person on board and then leave and not speak to the person again. And I think that's a critical part of the recruitment industry. And that's where a lot of people sometimes fall flat, especially as we've come out of COVID, the market when COVID hit plummeted, and it became all about candidate interaction, client interaction, and not trying to sell anything, but just checking in. And then coming out of COVID, when the market bounced back, we saw a lot of people enter back into the industry, and you could sit at your desk and the phone would ring and an order would come to you. And a lot of people loved that and boomed and did exceptionally well. But the problem was there was also a lot of people that were doing very transactional conversations and processes. Yeah. As the market shifted and it's got a bit softer, the conversations have been, well, I've got to do calls, I've got to phone people now to actually find jobs. And that's become a hard part. But with those conversations throughout the boom, if you were still maintaining those relationships and you actually built a genuine partnership, that would still be in play. So I think it's just evolved over the years. And because I love working in that HR space, it's what I do today could impact me further down the track. So it is about having those open and honest relationships, those transparent conversations, taking feedback on board, sharing honest feedback that you get. I think that's where the value comes in terms of those relationships.
It seems a much more longer term view of things, and having the ability or the bandwidth to actually, give yourself some time to do that. It seems like an interesting point. And leading on to that, there's a lot of, say, early career HR practitioners that listen to this podcast. We know that from a lot of the analytics, but from an early career perspective, if I can just sort of get you to time travel back to the early career you, what advice would you have for them? What advice would you have? I know a lot of people in HR are in recruitment as well, but from a HR or recruitment or both, what advice would you have for them?
Oh, look, I think if I had to go back and speak to myself when I first started in this industry, I had a amazing manager at the time. She was phenomenal at training. She was a bulldog, but she trained us really well. And one of the things that she always taught us, and it stuck with me forever, is especially coming from the South African market where you sort of went in and it was always, hello, Mr. Smith. And the first thing she said to me was, just because you're in recruitment doesn't mean that you are not at the same level. You're going in as a business partner. You're adding value with the service that you're offering. Go, and if you're going to call him Mr. Smith, you call yourself Mrs. Lazarus, or you call him Bob and Leanne. So that always stuck with me. I think I'd also tell myself not to take everything so personally. And that's just a personal thing where, if someone didn't want to take a job, I was hurt. It was like, oh, what did I do wrong? When it's not about me. I'm not here to make decisions for people. I'm here to work with people. So being able to, and that's where also taking the time to understand what's important for them made it a bit of an easier process to try and make a match. I think anyone in the HR space, what I hear in terms of the conversations that I have from HR professionals is, if you're starting a career in HR, it's not about the title. It's not necessarily about getting, and I mean, I understand with the economic times, salary is important, but sometimes it's more important to get into the right organization, into the right HR team. And I always say, find a team or a role where you are you are reporting to an HR manager or an HR professional. But having that, you'll have some little coach and mentor you. You'll get the strong foundation. You'll get the knowledge. You'll get the experience. Going into an HR role, if you've just graduated, in 6 months, you don't know the full role. You know the basics, but learn and understand the full foundation. Because sometimes if you grow too quickly and you push too quickly to grow, once you get to a certain level, you then identify gaps, and it's really hard to come back and
Yeah.
or learn that from the ground up. So take your time, learn as much as you can, be a sponge. I think that's the big thing I'll say to people, because in the HR space, if you look at legislation, yes, it's there, but you also have to read the circumstances, see the people, see the environment. You have to take all that into account, and it's not something you get just by reading the legislation. That you get by gaining experience and having the right team and manager to work with.
I suppose I get what you're saying, but I think a lot of people, especially in that early career, whether they're in HR, recruitment, or both, would say, "Oh, that's slowly for you to say, Leanne, considering where you are now." But I'm in a hurry. Like I want to grow. I want to grow. I want to get the opportunities now. I want to take them now. I want the big projects. I want the landmark change events. I want to do it now. And you're saying, "Whoa, just hang on, slow down, get your foundations right." How does someone balance that? That thinking, but also going, you need to get some of your basics down pat, because it's going to be very, very hard to bridge that gap later down the track.
Oh, look, it's conversations that I've had, and I've had a few people that have asked me to, from a recruitment perspective, to coach and mentor in terms of both from a recruitment perspective, but also HR graduates coming to the market, what to look for, what to ask, what to take into account. It is a fine line balancing act for people. Some people will go into roles in 5 months. I'll get a phone call to go to my first role in HR. I've been here for 5 months, haven't got a salary increase, haven't got a promotion. And I'm like, okay. I'm not saying stay in that role for 3 to 4 years. That used to be the case many years ago, is at all. But go in and spend time in that role and really understand the full role, the fundamentals, and the impact that role has further up. Growth will come when you have the knowledge and you prove yourself. Now, whether that be in the existing organization that you're in, or they've provided you with enough training, guidance, and knowledge to then look at taking that next step in another organization. That all just depends on what's available and on offer in the current organization. And it is hard sometimes to sort of sit there and go, well, I think I know most of it. But sometimes it's just staying a little bit longer to get that full understanding to set you up for success in the future.
Wow, that's actually a really good nugget. It's almost saying be patient, but be patient with purpose almost.
Right.
Yeah. Just stay that a little bit longer, really get that. I mean, actually in previous podcast guests have actually said something similar in a different type of way, that if you take a bit more time to get those foundations underfoot, it's going to really help you going further. And you're saying that from a recruitment perspective, actually, it's going to be really beneficial if you do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I suppose the other thing as well, we've got a lot of people who are probably working, I suppose, outside of HR and are looking to get into HR. Maybe, they're from operations or something like that. And looking to get into HR. What would be your advice for someone looking to get into HR?
Well, I'd definitely say look at sort of what skills you have that are transferable, because if you're in operations roles, you often are included or involved in some of the HR processes, not all of them. I would definitely say if that's a space that you really want to get into, look at doing further studies to get that qualification behind your name. Sometimes if you're looking to make the move from one area to another area, you may have to take a step back in order to take 2 steps forward. And what I mean by that, if someone's coming over and we sometimes see it from an operations perspective or an office management perspective, then do deal with some of the processes and procedures from an HR function and want to make a move over, but they want to move over at a business partner level.
Yeah.
Potentially that's not the right move, because has got a lot of levels to it. Maybe look at the advisor officer role where there is transferable skills, but you're also in an HR team where you have that mentor, that coach, the team to be able to give you advice and guidance, direction as well.
That's that's interesting that you say that, the mentor side of things. And you even mentioned that you've mentored people in the past, or maybe you've been mentoring people right now. What do you say in terms of having a mentor? what would you say that a person that's looking to get into HR or is probably early career,
Mm,
what would you say, like, what would you look for with a mentor? What would be the sort of traits
mm,
or experiences that
mm.
they should be looking for in a mentor?
Well, you need someone that's got proven skills and experience where there's
Yeah.
their achievements and that they've delivered results. You want someone who is happy to share that information. You're not looking for someone as a coach and a mentor. It's not doing, it's not telling, but it's more so asking, giving the opportunity, providing the guidance, giving them the scope to take on roles, but be there in that support. A lot of people say, look, I love to coach and mentor. Um, but when you look at their style and how they communicate, depending on the person they're going to be mentoring, it may or may not work. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of HR professionals that I deal with, and I'll say to them, I think you would be an amazing coach or a mentor, and they will say to me, That's what I love. I love to help grow. I love to help build capability in my people and in my team. I want to build my replacement. So when I'm ready to move on, I've got someone that can either take over from me, or I know when they move on, I've added some value. That's what you're looking for. You want to work in an environment where they will share your knowledge. They'll give you opportunity and accountability to get involved in different things and not prevent you or hold you back, but also within reason, because sometimes people will want to jump really quickly again and go, oh, well, I've done a project here and it was this big. Oh, that's a big project. I want that one now. Instead of going, oh, look, there's a middle-sized project. Can I get involved in that?
Yeah.
Take the steps, but have open communication and talk to your mentor or your coach about where you want to go, what you want, where you think your gaps are. Ask them how you can gain that experience and gain that knowledge. I've worked with, as I say, with a number of HR professionals where we've actually had HR coordinators, administrators, advisors that are working in smaller organizations, but potentially they're not reporting into an HR professional, but more either a GM or a CFO, which is great. They get the support, but they don't necessarily get that inside knowledge where I've actually helped to connect two parties that I think would be a good match. And I asked the
Yeah.
question first before I just introduced, but introducing the two
Yeah.
and letting them see how they go. I
Yeah.
don't get involved in the process, but opening up that door for conversation, I think is great.
Yeah, it's obviously something that you can see, even just talking to in all my HR Engage podcast guests, anyone in the HR community, any of my clients, anyone, RE members,
Mm,
that seems to come up a lot, that whole, having a mentor, but also maybe having the right mentors
mm,
to guide,
yeah.
because there are so many different philosophies out there, so many different ways of communication that it's almost very difficult to know which ones to go with.
Mm,
But what you're saying essentially is that you want someone that's actually quite giving. I think we both know people who aren't, who are not, and that's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but they're just not going to be mentors. They're going to be a different type of firefighting type HR
mm,
professional. There's nothing wrong with that again.
mm, no,
Compliance based only.
mm,
Again, nothing wrong. Where do you, from a company perspective, if I was to go back to the sort of, go back to the
mm.
company perspective, what do you find HR professionals are looking for in terms of a company or a culture or a role? What do you see they're looking to find?
Oh, look, there's a couple of things that HR professionals will want and look for in a role. And obviously, I don't know all of them because everyone's got their different needs. I think one of the key things for most HR professionals, they want to go into a role where they've got input or influence into change strategy projects. If it's a more senior level, they want a chair at the table where they have that opportunity too. And one of the questions, and I always get a funny look when I ask this from my clients, is it a chair or a stool? Right? Because a stool's uncomfortable. It gets pulled and you sit in it for a period of time, but eventually you get a little bit numb, so you don't sit down for much longer. Chairs that all inclusive. I think that's important. There's very few HR professionals that want to go into a role where it's purely maintenance. They want to go where they know they've got scope for change and challenge. Um, they want to go into an organization where HR is valued, HR is heard, not just seen as a admin function in the back end. They want to be included. They want to be part of it. They want to work for progressive organizations where there is that appetite for progression, for change, for innovation.
Mm.
And don't get me wrong, I mean, and they're not necessarily wanting you to walk in and change it all in one day, but be able to have those conversations is important. Most HR professionals are in HR because of their passion for what they do, which is why they do like to be in a role or an environment where they can share knowledge, they can coach and mentor. And as you say, there are some senior HR execs that are very strategic focused. That's where they want to sort of sit. They'll normally have a buffer between themselves and their team, where they'll have, if it's a HR exec, they'll have an HR manager who's probably more that people-orientated coach and mentor. So they always know, and they balance it out from that perspective. But companies want to work, HR professionals want to work in companies that have values that align. They don't want to work for an organization where the values are skewed or they do unethical behavior, where people are not valued. Those are all the critical things. In addition to that, they too, even going into those senior level roles, want to grow, want to still learn, want to still develop. So I'm finding in the HR space at the moment, a lot of HR professionals are exploring the market or open to new roles. It is about that career growth, learning, development. That's a critical thing that they're not necessarily getting in the roles they're in at the moment.
Yeah.
It could be that they've been in it for a while, they've delivered what they were brought on to do, and it's now getting to that maintenance role. Or potentially they're in a team where there is just their one-up is not moving on. There's no other scope. They're looking to then take that next step, but they can't do it in their current organization. So I think that's another thing that HR look for and want.
I love that concept of a chair or a stool at the table. What do you say to the school of thought where there's a school of thought definitely out there that actually HR don't belong at the table either through a chair or a stool? What do you say to that? And table, I mean the decision-making table.
Yeah. I think it's very short-sighted for a lot of organizations to think that. HR is a critical role. It's the same as when you talk about culture, because everyone goes, that says people and culture. Culture is not just the responsibility of HR. Culture building in an organization is from the top down, the bottom up, from side to side. It's everyone's responsibility to add to that culture. Yes, you do want a team that will create a strategy of where they want to get to, but a business is made up of people, and people can be your biggest asset or your biggest liability. It's when you look at it from the basics. And HR are there to both help build the capability of the people in your organization to be able to take that growth or that next step or build your business further. They're also there to mitigate risks, to make sure that from a compliance perspective, from a legislation perspective, as a business, you're not putting yourself into any harm's way. They're also there to make sure that to drive that people strategy that aligns to the business strategy. They both link. Your people and your business strategy need to intertwine, which is why they need to be at that table in one way or another, to be able to provide input, to be able to provide influence, to be able to provide information and data that can help make better decisions around their business strategy as well.
By the way, I'm loving being on this side of the table with you, Leanne. It's actually been really, I have to say it's a lot of fun. I have to say it's a lot of fun on this side of the table asking you questions. Great. I think what you're saying there about that the chair or stool, the table, and obviously the stool being uncomfortable, chair being a bit more comfortable. Did you see a trend as to what types of companies or executive teams tend to have a bit more of a chair as opposed to a stool? Do you see a trend, or is it almost like it's basically a case-by-case basis?
I would probably say more of a case-by-case basis. When we hit COVID, a lot of HR professionals went from either not being at the table to having a chair, like instantly, because we went through so much and it was such an unknown. Their roles became bigger. They were involved in a lot more, whether it be around the communication, whether it be around the well-being. It really sort of grew. As we've come out of COVID, I've seen with some organizations where it's gone, well, that's great. You did a great job, but thanks very much. Here's your box. But a lot of organizations have still embraced that and seen the value of what it brings. There's no specifics in terms of industries or size.
Yeah.
If you're small to medium, maybe a little bit more, because if it's privately owned, sometimes they sort of sit there and go, well, it's been great, but it's my business. I tend to make a decision as to where we go and what we do.
Yes.
So there's no specifics, but yeah, that would probably be a little bit more where you'd find it.
What do you hear? I mean, as someone that's more HR adjacent, what do you hear as some of the challenges HR facing currently? And I think, and I just want to ask that in a context, I think because of your particular go-to HR recruiter position, you have a very, unique position that no one really does have, where they can be quite transparent with you about
Mm.
what are the challenges they're facing. So what do you hear as some of the challenges HR facing currently?
There's a few things.
Mm,
So one of the things I always seem to find is HR teams are probably the most under-resourced teams in a business, but they're also the critical team for resourcing everyone else.
right.
So they are often high workload, spanning across the entire employee life cycle, both operational and strategic. So that's sometimes a challenge. I think looking in organizations where looking at projects in terms of systems, there's still a lot of companies that are working either very manually or working with really old systems. And if you've got an under resourced team and you're asking them to do it manually, it makes it really challenging and that puts a lot of pressure and can lead to people moving on. It can lead to burnout, can lead to incorrect information. So I think sometimes implementing a more up-to-date system can definitely help reduce the workload, work with around, improve the efficiency, but also that access to information and data to help drive better decisions and changes. I think another challenge for some is looking at technology. So if you talk about AI,
Mm,
AI is something that we definitely see more and more coming through in the market. From an HR perspective, we've seen it being used a bit more in the talent acquisition space, more in the work, the learning and development space. Looking at the onboarding side of things, it's been utilized a bit more there. There again, it's an interesting conversation. And one of the things I ask everyone that I talk to is, do you use HR? If you do, where do you use it? How do you use it? And it's definitely a mixed bag of response. Some are very big on it, use it, love it. Others are still very concerned, risk averse, dabble with it. So I think that AI is going to be something of interest. I think some of the challenge is that at times the lack of support of the executive leadership team when HR are coming in with, we're at risk, there's a concern, there's an opportunity, there's an initiative, there's a project or a program that would definitely help that blocker in terms of it's not urgent, it doesn't need to be done now. So I think there's a
yeah.
couple of things that are sort of faced from that perspective in HR at the moment. There's probably more because talking to people, there's always different things for different people.
Do you find it's a bit more, is it very cyclical? Or do you think there's basically the same things happening over and over and over again and it's just given a different name or branded differently or
I think different things at different times. I mean, AI, if you think about AI,
mm,
talked about it for a long time, but we're
yeah.
starting to see it come through more now, whether it be in writing an advert or job description or candidates using AI to write their resumes, which is you tend to pick up quite quickly. Organizations, we're talking about it. It's now been us starting to see it come through. So that'll be a topic that will sort of be going on for quite some time. But then you have things like legislation change. Every
Yeah.
legislation change that brings a whole new feat of challenges or changes, there'd be to policies, processes, procedure, structure. It's different things happen at different times. There's certain things that you will see go on the roundabout. Hot topic cools down, hot topic cools down. It's
Yes.
one of those. It's just a variety.
Yeah. 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 So there is an element of cycle, but also at the same time, we do have a couple of big hitting topics like
Mm,
AI, for example, that looks like it's going to stay around for a while and there's going to continue to be challenges
mm.
for HR.
And people in organizations, because we have a annual report that our fantastic marketing team put together for us. And in there, we've sort of asked around what employees are wanting. And one of those things outside of learning and development and training is, and coaching and mentoring is another one, but it is that AI tech upskilling in
Yeah.
businesses. And it's not just in HR, it's across the business. People want to know more about AI for two reasons. One, how do I work smarter, not harder? But two, for some people, it is, how do I get ahead of the curve?
Yeah.
How's it going to impact me? How's it going to impact my job? What do I need to do to get ahead of it? And there again, it leads to generations as well, because your Gen Zs, very technology savvy, pick things up really quickly, whereas potentially your baby boomers, a lot can pick it up really quickly, but potentially a little bit more hesitant when you look at AI.
Yeah. Yeah. Really interesting
Hmm.
perspective. Just going back to that sort of HR vertical,
Mm.
especially on the recruitment side, what roles are you finding coming up more within the HR space?
We've still seen a lot of generalist roles, HR
Okay.
generalist roles coming through where it's working and supporting the full employee life cycle. In those roles, there is the request for ER, IR. There is the request for potential more exposure to leadership development training programs. So there's generalist roles, all levels. We are seeing more L&D, OD roles coming through because organizations have realized that from a retention factor, you need to build the capabilities and that will help retain people for a bit longer. We are seeing more work health and safety roles coming in, but I think we'll see more work health, safety, and well-being
Yeah.
roles coming through, looking at your psychosocial risks, looking at mental health, sexual harassment, bullying, all of those factors coming into there, I think there'll be a shift in that, which also then opens up the topic about, does work health safety sit on its own, or does it now filter more into HR?
Oof,
Hot topic.
hot
Uh,
topic.
yes. Well, if it's a physical injury, that's one thing, but mental health, psychosocial, you sort of need the input and influence of HR. So that's another debate.
I think that's a panel idea if I've ever heard of one. Having,
Agreed.
health and safety, HR, just go at it and go, have someone like a moderator in there and just, go, hey, what are you,
Moderator.
like, putting that question. I think you'll get so many different answers to that. I think that's a really, it's a hot debate that's been happening for a while. Probably maybe cool down because of AI and everything else, but definitely one that's bubbling across the surface
Absolutely.
amongst many organizations. And even, and what I see as well, and you probably see the same thing, even if, let's say, HR and WHS are different in different divisions and they've got to work together, maybe payroll's the other one or finance is probably the other one that's sort of separate, you can really see when they do work together.
Correct.
That's a lot of effort, a lot of time, because they do have to communicate. There needs to be a lot more. Every time they want to do a project or anything, they'll have to talk together.
Correct.
If that's really good, it seems to be from the leaders though, in those areas. If that's really good, it looks like it's fantastic. If it's not good, it's like almost like an abomination. Like it's
Correct.
really bad. So is that what you're seeing as well?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. I think it's definitely a hot topic, and I think it will eventually get to a point where it'll work itself out.
Yes.
But I think at the moment, as I say, your traditional work health and safety specialists have always been really good at the physical, the risk management, that side of it. It's just coming to that psychosocial mental health aspect of it. It does lean into the HR side. So I think the key thing would be to either, if you want to blend those roles, or have two areas that work really well together. And that comes down to that communication collaboration piece where we're on the same page, we're trying to get the same objective. If we do it together, we get there easier, as opposed to internal fighting, which could actually make that situation a lot bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you talk with HR professionals so much, where would you say the priorities are currently?
I think for a lot of organizations, it has been around the retention space. So looking at how to retain staff, that then leads into that training and development. How do they grow their capabilities? Also looking at legislation changes, how that impacts the business, what they need to change in terms of that. We are starting to see a few more sort of IR cases coming to the forefront in some industries and organizations, a lot more than others. I think that's also going to be a big thing that we'll see more of in the future. So maybe in sort of 12 to 24 months, we'll definitely see more dedicated IR roles coming through. I think a lot of it has come to there's a fair bit of recruitment happening, but a lot of it is replacing existing roles as opposed to newly created roles. And I think it's really looking at the employee experience. So looking at their benefits, their perks, their EVP and what they offer. Because in the marketplace, don't get me wrong, salary is still important because, we've got to live, got to eat. And with everything going on, that can be a challenge. But I think it comes down to that package. And that's what I say to a lot of my clients is, it's not just salary. It does come down to culture. It does come down to growth opportunities, training, development, but also your additional benefits that you offer. And the interesting thing is talking to HR professionals, and that a lot of people say to me, we've got all these great perks and benefits, but not many people actually take us up on it. And I'm seeing more and more organizations bringing out a really nice EVP document where it outlines everything. And it's not just given to someone on the day they start, because that tends to be what happens, but they refreshers and bringing it back out and going, don't forget, we've got EAP, which, most organizations don't have, but don't forget you've got birthday leave or you've got life leave or whatever their benefits are, reminding people that it's there. So it comes down to that whole package that people are looking for. So I think HR is spending a fair bit of time in that EVP side of things as well.
What's the one thing that different HR professionals will not always agree on? What's the thing?
I think it comes down to each organization and industry. But I think if you look at AI at the moment, that's probably one of the easiest ones to sort of go to. As I mentioned earlier, I've got HR professionals that use it extensively. They utilize it for a lot of their stuff and they love it. I've got others that are more hesitant where they might go, I've written what I want, I'll put it into AI and go rewrite it and go, oh, I like that and I like that, and put it over. Because you never want to just cut and paste it over, because when you read it, you sort of go, that looks AI generated. But utilizing AI in terms of information, which I think is good, but I also say to people, it's not gospel. AI pulls from a lot of different areas. It's still learning. So I would still do more research and more reliable sources for the moment to use. But is a topic in the HR space that's coming up. How do I use it? Where do I use it? What do I fully automate in terms of AI? Whether I have a system that review resumes and break it down for me that way, but then also looking at what do I automate with human interaction? What do I keep from that human interaction perspective as well?
It seems to be, I mean, there's so many schools of thoughts on AI in the HR space. There's just so many, ranging from fully integrate everything, go hard, and it's going to make mistakes, but you absorb the mistakes and take the brunt of it, but we're going to be at the forefront.
Yeah.
To, yeah, it's useful to an extent, but it's, it still looks kind of rubbish. And then sort of everywhere in between. It's a very difficult topic because there's no 100% answer to any of these things just yet. I mean, maybe there will be, maybe there won't. I don't know. I don't think anyone really knows just yet. I find it, the only thing that sort of I see from a HR perspective is the information I think is interesting. That's interesting. I don't know, take reports or, legislation or anything like that. Seems to be, okay on those parts. The implementation of it's a bit harder. That's probably a bit harder still. And then from, going further than that, actually distilling that into actually something that is quite strategic is probably a bit harder again. It can be done. And I've seen people play around with it. But it's definitely not like a 5-minute or 10-minute thing. You're still got to work through it, work with it. Even sort of all the AI people I've seen do presentations, I don't think I've seen one presentation where it's gone absolutely right the first time. Like, what I mean by that is, they said, oh, we've gone from here to here. There's always some weird thing that pops up. But I suspect that's going to smooth out. So
I think we're on an AI journey.
Yes. So is the question really going to be, so the question maybe I more have for you on that point is, let's say that sort of starts ironing itself out and it starts to smooth out and, we've got a bit more, I don't know, dependability of what it is. I'm just talking about beyond 2000 type conversations, a bit more like, oh, it's here, it's okay. It's not not gonna world killer, everyone was saying, but it's not crap either. It's okay in that okay zone. How do you see then that progression from a HR perspective? Do you see that as going to be something that will, enhance positions? Do you think it's going to take away some positions? Do you think that the roles are going to change drastically? What do you see from your perspective? Obviously, crystal ball gazing here now, but what do you see from that perspective?
Look, I think, if you look at HR, the title HR or people and culture or any of the titles that we have in that space, it's got that people element, it's got that human element. AI, I think, will enhance a lot of the functions. It'll help streamline processes and procedures, which will impact some roles. But I don't necessarily think it's going to take away a lot of roles. No one's going to turn around and go, well, that's it. The system can rate our candidates as they're coming through, gone be talent acquisition. It's never going to happen. When you look at internal recruitment consultant, internal talent acquisitions, that kind of thing, there's that human element. They know the business, they know the culture, they know the line managers, they know the pain that the managers are going through. So when you look at a resume, if you get AI to write your resume exactly to the advert, absolutely it'll come up as a 100% match. But a lot of organizations are not necessarily looking for that 100% match in terms of skills and experience. A lot of organizations still want that human element to understand the person's aptitude, the attitude, and that's where the human element will come in. So it might help streamline talent acquisition internally, but it's not going to take away the function. Because you can rate someone, but if you're happy to have people that just tick the box in terms of skills and experience, you're going to go into culture decay because you're not going to have culture because it's not working around the values of the business and aligning it. So I think it'll enhance things. I think it will make some changes, but I think it depends on how it's implemented and how it's used in a business as to whether or not it'll be seen as a big positive and a let's get on board versus people that'll be very, very much hesitant to get involved.
Love to hear what those AI evangelists would say about what you just said. I think it's a very interesting debate that we're happening in the workplace. Obviously, the workplace is changing And there's no doubt there's AI evangelists, there's also AI doomsayers,
Yeah.
and there's everyone in between. Some that see it as a risk, some that see it as challenges, some see it as both.
Yeah.
I think it's such an interesting topic of discussion, especially in the HR space. I know there's heaps of other avenues, but focusing just on the HR space, I think it's huge changes afoot.
Yeah.
And it's good, interesting to know your perspective that, look, the human element's probably going to be even more important
Mm.
going forward if this is implemented the way that we think it is.
Yeah. Correct.
So let's wind it back a little bit to now as we let's think about the future now. So what does the HR market look like right as we speak?
Look, the first part of the year was probably a little bit softer than we've seen in a while. The first 6 months has been a bit of an up and a down ride. We are
Mhm.
starting to see a bit more movement taking place in the market. As I said, those three roles, the generalist, the work health and safety and well-being, and L&D OD roles are really coming through to the forefront. There are other positions, whether it be HR projects, whether it be remuneration and benefits, whether it be some ERI roles. It is starting to become a bit more stronger in terms of the Brisbane market, if I just talk from a local perspective. There's definitely vacancies out in the market and there's definitely talent out in the market. It's just about whether or not those matches happen.
Interesting. So watch this space. I think there's going to be loads of changes in
Mm,
HR this year, next year, and the year after, I suspect,
correct.
in terms of the roles are going to come up and also the roles are going to entail.
Correct.
Okay. This is obviously a very special episode um, where we've got someone from a more of a HR adjacent field. However, we always have a tradition here on the HR Engage podcast, and that is to ask these rapid fire questions. So basically, I'm going to ask you a question. You just give me the first answer that comes to your mind. Is that okay?
Give it a go.
It really didn't matter what you're going to say. I want to continue anyway. So
There goes that control aspect again. Yes.
it's great. Okay, firstly, what is your favorite movie?
I have a few. That's the challenge of it. It depends on the mood.
Yes.
So anything from Star Wars to Venom to an action movie. I love action movies, but there has to have comedy in it. I'm not a big rom-com fan. It's not.
Okay.
Yeah. So more of your action
Actually, with a
comedy.
bit of comedy. A bit of
Yeah.
comedy.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. What is your favorite holiday destination?
Well, outside of going back home to visit family in South Africa, I would have to say Japan. We went there a
Oh,
couple of years ago. It was absolutely beautiful. The people are amazing, food's delicious, and it's just such a great destination. But we try to do, yes, the touristy things, but also the not so touristy things.
yes.
And we just came back and loved it. And I did so much research and watched so many travel vlogs because we were due to go in 2020 and COVID hit. So we ended up going in 2023. So I watched so much. And everyone always says when you go to Japan and you love it, and when you leave, you actually get depressed. And I was like, that would never happen. It did. So needless to say, we are planning for our next trip.
Is a particular part of Japan that you absolutely loved?
I just loved experiencing all of it. I think
Yeah.
it's such a unique country. We found everyone was so friendly and polite and respectful. From being helped at the train station when you're looking at the train board, and you definitely have that look of, oh hell, where am I going? Someone stopping and asking if they can help. So we just thoroughly enjoyed it.
That's awesome. Oh,
Mm.
fantastic. Apart from family and friends, who has inspired you the most?
I can't say there's just one person. I think there's different people. Like I mentioned, when I started in the industry, I had a manager. Her name was Cindy. She was a fiery redhead. She was phenomenal. Very big on training, very big on coaching, spent a lot of time with people, learned so much from her. And just over the years, different people that I've interacted with, both from within the recruitment industry, but I find even more so now, so in that HR space, there's a lot of HR professionals that if I have a question or if I have a thought and I go, well, I wonder if that's right, that I can pick up the phone and have the conversation with, where they,
Yeah.
they sort of go, oh, appreciate you actually giving me a call and asking me for my insights. So there's no one specific. I just find different people inspire you in different ways.
Yeah, it's great. And what is the thing you do outside of work that you're passionate about or sort of keeps you going?
For me, it's a lot about family. and which is obviously challenging because most of them are back in South Africa. But going for walks, I find just having quiet time, because being in recruitment, much like HR, it's people focused and there's a
Yep.
lot of conversations, there's a lot of interactions, there's a lot of highs, there's a lot of lows, it's a roller coaster. But I find just having a bit of quiet time, going for nice long walks along the river, doing that and spending some time with friends, I find that just helps to revive the soul.
Oh, that's awesome. And tell us something about yourself that people don't know about you.
Hmm. I ride a motorcycle.
Oi, I didn't know that.
Hmm. Yeah.
Ah,
Yep, yep. And look, obviously, it's in my family. My husband's a avid motorcyclist, so yeah, that's one of the things we do on weekends from time to time to also go and relax. The difference is in South Africa, you could do more speed than what you can do here. So here we just enjoy the scenery and the ride.
whoa, whoa, whoa. There has to be a story behind that. So you ride a motorcycle.
Mm.
How did this come about? How did this come about?
I've always loved motorcycles, and as I said, my husband is an avid rider, but he also
Yep.
works in the industry. So, um, the first time I ever got onto a motorcycle with him, we went for a ride. And when I came home, my mother sort of said to me, she goes, "I don't like you being on the back of the motorcycle." And I was like, "Oh." And she goes, "How fast did you go?" And this is in South Africa. And I was like, "Oh, about 108."
Woo.
And she started getting really upset about it. And I was like, "Oh, and by the way, I've got a tattoo as well." So she wasn't quite sure which way to go and to complain about or hone in on. So, yeah. So ever since then, it's just been a bug that bit. And
Yeah.
it's phenomenal. I love it. It's freedom.
Wow. Fantastic.
Mm,
Fantastic. So I suppose closing it off, if you could
mm.
recommend a book, movie, TV show, or podcast to listeners, what would that be and why?
I don't have one specific. If you're talking about recruitment, I would definitely have a look at Greg Savage. He's an industry leader. He's got a number of books out there. He's also got his own training academy. So that's really good. I would just say focus on what's going to be relevant for you. Knowledge is always power, and it's always what you do with that knowledge and what you take on board. So it really comes down to individuals as to what's going to be right for them.
I'm going to answer for you on that one. I think that through the HR Lens webinar series that yourself and people put
Mm,
together, and there's a few other
mm,
subsidiaries to that or other parts to that, but I think it's been fantastic focusing on the HR perspective.
mm.
I think has been really good. So, I think that's a good one. You can find that on LinkedIn and on the People to People website. But yeah,
Absolutely.
it's a really good one.
Or through either of our pages is there as well.
I'll throw out all the paper. Okay, there you go. Yes, plug it as you may. Plug it as you may. Our conversations has been really different
Mm,
to a lot of the other podcast guests, and one of the real reasons I wanted to really have this chat to you is because you are in that HR vertical, but you are not, but you are HR adjacent. You are
mm,
not in the HR
mm,
space, but you are really the go-to recruiter in the HR
mm.
space. So your perspective is very unique. It's not biased really in
No.
any way. There's obviously things that you said that were quite similar to
Mm,
what others have said. AI obviously being going to be a big factor right now and going forward. There's no doubt about that. You've also talked about how there's that trust and transparency
yeah.
being really important in building that. Also, you've sort of talked about, early career professionals, maybe, hey, getting that foundations right,
Mm,
which is a bit counterintuitive to what you want to do, but get those foundations right and stay a little bit longer
mm,
in that role to really get a handle of it before you move on to the next one, I think is a really interesting bit. I think the one that really has resonated to me was in HR, do you either have a chair or a stool
yeah.
at the table, as opposed to do you even have a seat at the table? You're saying, no, there should already be one, but whether it's a chair or a stool is the difference. I
Correct.
think it's super interesting to hear that perspective because you're obviously hearing that a lot. Like you're
Yeah.
obviously hearing that a lot. So whether that's being sold as something different or whether, the value alignment and the values alignment aren't
Mm,
aligned,
no.
you're obviously hearing that so much that's
Mm,
becoming quite a repetitive thing. So yeah, do you have a chair or a stool at the table? I think is a really
mm,
interesting perspective. And then of course, hearing from your perspective not just as a HR recruiter and what you're seeing and what people are telling you, but also just a little bit about yourself in terms of why you've gone
Mm.
into the HR, because it must be such a difficult spot to have built into and then sustain that. I think is really interesting. It has been such an awesome conversation, and great to be the one that asks you the questions too as well, Leanne.
Thank you very much for having me on board. I appreciate it.
Now, to leave us, is there a quote or a moment of inspiration you'd like to leave us with?
I just work on the premise of, if treat everyone with respect. My mother always used to tell me that any conversation that you have, treat it like a tube of toothpaste. Because once you've squeezed the toothpaste out, you can never get it back in. So think about what you say to people, but be resilient. There's going to be challenges, there's going to be obstacles. Nothing necessarily lasts forever. So look for the positive and work your way around it. I mean, it might give you gray hair, I've got plenty, sparkles, but there's color for that. So that's all good.
Leanne Lazarus, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on board on the HR Engage podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much as well. I appreciate it.
And that's it for me on the HR Engage podcast. That's another episode. Obviously, subscribe, follow us on YouTube. We've also on LinkedIn quite a lot, Spotify, Apple, iTunes, and there's other platforms. But follow, subscribe, make sure you're following all the other guests that we're talking to. And of course, post this, tag other people so it reaches more people in the HR community. So it doesn't matter if you're listening on the beach, if you're listening in the car, listening on wherever you are. Hope you're absolutely enjoying yourself. That's me again, Jonathan Mamaril with the HR Engage podcast. Speak soon.